Hello, welcome back to another episode of Cal's Questions in Ampersand Productions. I am Cal, as is the name Cal's Questions. That's where that comes from. I'm Cal, I'm going to be asking questions. And that is Paul, the producer, that you can see that wonderful white earphones, bearded Hawaiian shirt. Man, is that a Hawaiian shirt?
It's a Hawaiian t-shirt. So yes, it's all I own that is cool enough at this moment because it is very, very warm where I currently am.
And we are joined by a very special guest, the DM of a podcast that I really enjoy, Adventurers Anonymous. We are joined by AJ. Welcome.
Hey, how it is so good to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show.
That's absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on. I'll if it's all right with you, I just want to say that I really enjoy your podcast. It's hilarious. It's so funny, and anyone who's looking for a funny D&D actual play, I strongly recommend Adventurers Anonymous. It is a blast, and AJ here does a fantastic job, and I can't wait to pick his brain and see what's going on in that noggin when he deals with such chaos, I've got to be honest. But yeah, tell us a bit about yourself, AJ.
What do you need to know? Also, before we get going on me, because I'll never shut up about me, you possibly have the greatest voice in the industry, Cal. Like, I know you've been on our podcast before. I forget how, you've got dulcet tones. You come across on a mic very well.
Thank you very much. That's very good.
Yeah, there is a reason I asked Cal to do this for me. It's because his voice just soothes you and calms you. And no matter what, it just keeps your attention at all times. So, it's a good voice, Cal. You should keep it.
He had to really... Yeah, he wouldn't let me sleep, and he kept banging on my door, and he was like, "You got to do it, you got to do it." Eventually, I caved in. So, that's how we're doing this.
And that's how you're doing this. Okay, yes.
We're here to talk about you. Go for it.
How far back do you want to go? We can go
all
the way back to when
story. What is your origin story?
My origin story? Well, I crawled out of Margaret about 39 years ago. After that, bit of a pause as I learned to talk and walk. No. So probably, I'm guessing you want to know a little bit about... you want to know a little bit about my background with TTRPGs and
exactly that.
Kind of fantasy nerddom. So basically, I was the nerdiest of all nerds growing up as a kid. I've always been into nerd culture. Like, very, very fortunate. I suppose growing up that my mum had worked for a publishers and was an artist, and so was just surrounded by books. Literally, never wanted for books. Just some of my earliest memories. Genuinely, some of my earliest memories. I remember just sitting in the sunlight by a window, reading all sorts of different books, and I've never stopped. I can't remember a time in my life, in all honesty, where I wasn't reading some sort of fantasy book. I think haven't always played D&D. I'm not going to lie. You probably ask me this later, but I can't say I'm a lifetime D&Der. As much as I run a podcast now, and I love DMing and couldn't imagine life without it. Didn't get into it a bit later on. We had a bunch of nerds at school. We used to play a Star Wars TTRPG,
awesome,
which was pretty damn cool, I've got to admit. But then, didn't really play D&D again for most of my adult life. And then got into it maybe 3 or 4 years ago again through some friends. But always been into kind of nerdy and geekdom. I am a lifelong Games Workshop fan. You can often find me with the Warhams, painting models, playing any kind of tabletop game. So that I've got a strong background in all things nerdy and fantasy. But yeah, from my point of view, we only really started playing D&D because we needed something to do in lockdown. And now a very good friend of mine who was a work colleague said, I've got some friends and they've never played D&D before. Can you run us a campaign? And I'm a cretin, so I was like, yeah, absolutely. Never met any of these people. Fast forward several years later, and we're in lockdown, and we can't get together, so we're playing D&D, and it was fun, and we were pissing ourselves laughing, and we thought, why not record this? And some of the earliest episodes are abysmal in terms of their audio quality, but the fun is there for sure. And for me, just answering all the questions you haven't answered yet, the reason I really got into it is because I sort of come from doing a background of improv comedy, and during lockdown you just couldn't meet people. You couldn't get on stage, you couldn't meet people to do improv. Well, DMing is the ultimate in improv. You've got the blankest of canvases and an infinite number of characters to kind of pick from. And in terms of podcasts, the audience is infinite. I can pick on them all day.
Yeah.
So that's where we find ourselves at the moment, and it's getting becomes more of a success every week, and every time I swear to God I'm going to give up on it, and it's too much work, because it takes a lot of work to run a podcast. Like, you get through planning the damn campaign, you get through running the campaign, and then you get to edit the podcast, and then you get to promote the podcast. So if I'm lucky, there's probably one day or half a day a week where I'm not doing something to do with the podcast. So it is a labor off. But every time I think I'm going to give up, someone says something lovely, and they're like, "Oh my word, this is brilliant." We've had everything from people in Brazil tiling their bathroom who were like, "Yeah, pissing themselves laughing. Listen to this." We've had people put together Spotify playlists about our characters. Like we've had all sorts of stuff, and it really, and then lovely people like you invite me on your show to talk about it, and I think, oh, maybe I won't pack it in quite yet. So.
Yeah, well, like I say, I listen to it. I am listening to it, and it is very entertaining. I do have to ask you, how did the group name of the Crunkfuckers come about?
Oh, the Crunkfuckers, that goes way back. They arrived in a port town. We'd had a bit of a hiatus in playing, and they arrived in a port town, and they met a local captain called Captain James P. Gibberstop, and he hired them to try and put another fishing fleet out of business. And it turned out it was Captain James P. Gibberstop's brother-in-law. And they took their boat, and they didn't want it to be associated. Captain James P. Gibberstop said, "I do not want my boat to be associated in this crime." So they took a pot of paint and they hung off the side of the boat, and upside down or back to front, they wrote the expression "Crunkfuckers." Also, as any DMs, I don't know how any people listening to this have ever tried DMing. Your players will ask you at some point, if you create a universe, there will come a point, it might be in episode 1, it might be in episode 100, there will come a point when your players ask you about drugs in the universe that you're playing in, and you instantly have to have a list of class A, B, and C drugs that can be smoked, snorted, and imbibed. And crunk was quite a heavy drug, I think, in the universe I created. There was also something called bizzle from memory, but so crunk was a drug. I appreciate this is no longer a child friendly.
It never was.
It hasn't been since episode 1, so don't worry about it.
We advocate clean living here at Adventurers Anonymous. Very PG-13. Had to put a warning at the front of all of our podcasts because people were starting to get a little bit antsy. So put out a little warning that it's fully improvised and wholly inappropriate.
Yeah, and you're right to do so. I think that's a fair warning. It's not, as you say at the start of your podcast, it's not really for little ears, is it? So, there's moments. Some episodes are, and then there's episodes where we milk the cow. That I'm not even sure the Board of Film Certification would be able to put a certification on that. It's so filthy. It was well. That was certainly very entertaining. Paul, I do have to jump in and ask you something here. Oh. How do you feel about drugs being included in a campaign? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
We might be discovering some stuff in the future, but I will probably avoid it because of how PG I have tried to make Homebrew Havoc. There isn't anything too extreme in terms of narcotics. I'm saying that as you play a drunk owl, but Yeah, there might be some drugs in there. Who knows? You guys might get
Well,
to discover
yeah.
them.
So just out of interest, there isn't a great deal of drugs in our podcast or even in our campaign. There was one famous moment where Aristobulus was attempting to row a boat down a river. I think this is pre-stream, pre-recording, and he decided to take some mushrooms he found on the riverbank, I think. And so I knew where the campaign was going, so I gave him one of those flash forward moments, but he didn't know it was a flash forward moment, so it preempted something that was going to happen. Like, like he had a lucid dream, or he'd gone on a vision quest or something. So yeah, I mean, like recreationally, our players aren't taking a great deal of drugs in the campaign, but you asked me about the crunkfuckers, and I had to be honest.
I had to know because I just wanted to know the origin story, and that's fantastic. So
I'm not really sure I trust you guys to be on drugs, to be honest with you. With the craziness and suggestions, I'm not sure Fight Night will be made any better or worse with narcotics.
It's bad enough just with the cocktails, to be honest. Like I have offered, and again, like for anyone who's familiar with our podcast, obviously we're all about that cocktail life. I've said to the players, there's extra XP available every week. This doesn't ever get aired, but in the WhatsApp group, I always say extra XP for whoever has the most flamboyant cocktail. Nice. It's always me. Like they never do. There's a slice of lemon in a gin is about.
Calm down. Slice of lemon.
I'm there with my cocktails on fire, with little like broomstick sticking out of them. Like, yeah, it's
awesome. That's so cool. I mean, so you were doing it for quite a while before you started podcasting. I think, what was the moment where you just went, this would be great as a podcast? Is there a specific moment you can remember where you thought this would be great to like have an audience for?
That's a really good question. I'm a bit of a show pony, so I'm always like showing off and pissing about, and I like to put myself out there. And I remember we accidentally recorded one because before pre-stream, pre-podcast, we played over Zoom.
I just think how'd you accidentally?
Damn it! Not again! I pressed record.
The video.
How did it happen?
And I remember. Seriously, like Chris, who's the voice of Tatty Bojangles, someone like that, recorded it, and it was Sunday morning, and I was sitting tucked up in bed with my like espresso and croissant, and somebody sent me this video, and it was like an hour. In fact, it's episode 1. It genuinely is episode 1 from the podcast, and we took the audio out of it. It's why it's so crap, because it's single stream. We didn't even like have all the different audio channels, and I was just pissing myself laughing. I think it's the bit. And again, I'm just blowing my own trumpet here, where Matt, who plays Belsiar, is sneaking up on a tabaxi roof. I always call it rooftop, treetop village, and you can hear the tabaxi above, and he suddenly says, "I'd like to detect thoughts." And I panicked, and I was like, "Shit, I don't have anything." So I just made the tabaxi Welsh, and it went down really well. And so you've got these like Welsh cats who are like, "All right, boyo," and it worst Welsh impression ever. And my Welsh accent is so bad that it sort of became an ongoing joke now that all tabaxi are Welsh in our campaign.
As a Welshman, I condone this. This is brilliant. Yes, exactly.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that.
No, that's brilliant. That's good. And little quirks like that make it feel alive. And that was an example of sort of improv. That was improv right there. You had to think on your feet. Someone throws out detect thoughts, and you think, "Oh shit." What tips would you have for people who have to think on their?
I'm gonna get a
feet?
notepad.
I know that's a big question.
I'm gonna get a notepad.
My advice to people who have to think on your feet. It's a good question. Obviously, I had the benefit of having done lots of improv. When I was learning improv, when I was a wee nipper, which I don't know, 10 years ago or something, people said to me, "It's like a muscle. It's like anything. It's like if you want to be creative, you have to exercise your creative muscles. If you want to be strong, you have to actually exercise your bloody muscles." In terms of improv, it's interesting. What you have to do is chip away at the fear that you're wrong. Now, that sounds mad, but one of the things, and I'm so far beyond that point now that I don't even think about it. But for a lot of people, they don't chip in when they can improvise because they're actually afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid of not being funny enough. They're afraid of cutting across someone else, ruining someone else's idea, accidentally copying someone's idea. I mean, it's quite hard it's quite hard to have an original thought because sometimes it feels like everything that is funny or creative has already been done. So you have to just give yourself permission to create something in midair, and it doesn't matter. It could be absolute crap. Throw it away. Just brush it under the carpet and carry on. And all of that in a split second. Easy, right? But my advice is to just do it and just enjoy the moment. Other advice I could give, and again, I mean, there's no time to think of all of this whilst attempting to think on your feet, is don't do it for you, do it for someone else. So improv, and certainly improv comedy, works best when you're not trying to deliver the punchline. You're trying to set someone else up.
Yeah.
If you can set someone else up for something brilliant, all the better. And they will hopefully set you up. So trying not to be the funniest person in the room, trying not to be the punchline of everything. I know I fail miserably at that because I'm a show pony. But giving people gifts is what they're called in improv. Like hand them something funny. Like hand somebody. So when we were doing going back to that Tabaxi rooftop. Going back to the Tabaxi treetop village. Rooftop village. Going back to the Tabaxi treetop village, I left loads of stuff in there. Like in the leader of the Tabaxi, he on his bed on the map, I think he had a paddle and some aubergines or something like that. They weren't for me, they were for the players. I was like, well, if you find them, that'll be fun. Like it's leaving little silly gifts for people, I think, is good in terms of improv. And the other one, which again is just well worn and incredibly boring, but is the bottom rung of all improv, is yes and.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned that to you, Paul, in recently as well. But yes, that's absolutely it. But it's the reason why it's the bottom role is because it works, and that is just it. But if you're going to throw aubergines at someone, they're going to run away and think, is it that whole? Do you throw in something that's like completely obscure, so they almost have no choice but to like do that? Or is that what you're trying to achieve when you say like there's an aubergine on the bed? I mean, are you trying? Or is that just are you throw in these sort of hooks out there and hoping then you land a big fish?
You got to keep it somewhere between fun and abstract. If you go too far, it's mind-bogglingly abstract. It's like being John Malkovich. Your head just explodes. Like you can't go too far. But say like there was an interesting point where, oh god, long before we started recording the podcast, the players were investigating a abandoned library, I want to say, in a city, and they're wandering around, and it's quite tense. And they were aware they weren't alone in there, and they made their way into the bathroom of all places, which is abandoned. And there was quite a lot of tension in the game, and I thought, I'm going to bring this back down to earth. So they found a skeleton in the bathroom of the library, and they were like, describe the skeleton. So I had him as, one of those people, I don't know if they still exist, but like certainly when I used to go night clubbing, you can tell I'm getting old because I called it night clubbing, not clubbing. When you used to go out to clubs, you used to get a guy in the toilets who would offer to like wash your hands and put cologne and stuff like that. So I had a little skeleton. Yeah. You had to, I know how to wash my hands, thanks.
I've done this before.
So I had a skeleton.
I'm quite good at
it. So I had this skeleton, and it was a little skeleton, and he had a little hat with some coins in, and he had loads of colognes and stuff like that. So it was a little bit of silliness inside a moment that was quite tense. Because I thought, anyone can have a skeleton lying around in a toilet, but I thought, let's give this guy a bit of personality, and they instantly used the cologne and stole the money out of his hat.
Naturally, of course. Which nicely leads me on to my next questions. The chaos of Adventurers Anonymous is I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's bloody brilliant. And I particularly, I mean, hats off to you for dealing with it. Should we call it chaos wrangling? I'm not sure. But how do you find yourself having to control their chaos somewhat, or do you just let them rip?
It's a really good point. It's like herding geese, isn't it? How do you keep everyone in check? Well, what I do when I dungeon master, when I play, I know where I would like it to go, but I don't need it to go there. I know where I need the campaign to go. I roughly know when we enter an episode where I would like it to end up, but I don't rigidly write my episodes, because I will allow people the freedom to go where they want and need to go, unless they're going to start, I've got various cardinal lines in the sand that, I'm sure that's an expression, but we'll use it. There are various lines in the sand that I can't let them break, but by and large, if they suddenly want to hire a boat and go with it, why not? If they suddenly want to stop halfway through an episode and go into a greengrocer's, why not? Aristobulus is quite famous for like doing random stuff like that, and I think you have to be true to it. As long as it's true to the universe they're in, why not? And oftentimes, when people throw a bit of chaos in, I think, brilliant, I'll let you do it, but there'll be a consequence later. I won't forget this. So long before we started recording it, Hanash, they went to see a practitioner of magic. Her name was Madame Monsieur, because I was bored and that sounded easy. And she, like all practitioners of the dark arts who are old and female, had millions of cats, and he drop kicked a cat. And I was like, well, A, you can't drop kick a cat because that's not nice.
No.
And B, I don't think she's going to appreciate it. So, there were later ramifications. He got cursed, etc., etc., etc. So I think, go for your bit of chaos, but there may be ramifications later. And then that makes people think.
Oh, yeah.
I think...
So,
sorry if I may. The last two questions and like your answers specifically, because I don't have a background of improv like the both of you, but I will say that Homebrew Havoc is quickly becoming 104% improv on my part. I know all the characters, like the NPCs and the town they're in, and I know their motivations. I have no idea what the players are going to come up with next, so I've stopped prepping, if I'm completely honest. Until they leave this town, I don't know what the hell's going to happen.
I think there's a joy in that.
No, absolutely. I think it's wonderful, but I think with regards to how much chaos there should be and the lines of the sand that you mentioned, it's about trusting your players. Because, there's sometimes I'll go to them before the session. Please don't go to this location yet because I've not prepped it. Right? Please stay in this town for another session. I'll prep it next session. And they do. And there's always enough content in that town to do it. Or like, I know that recently for us, not recently for most people watching this, I threw quite a heavy plot twist into the campaign. Turns out one of the players' families was evil or was not good, was sort of killing people, right? And I trusted my players to be able to respond to that quickly enough that it didn't break the flow of the game. And I trusted their improv ability as much as I trust my own, so I knew that I could do it. But I only knew that because I built up that trust with players. And I'm sure you built the trust with your players as well.
That's a very good point. Yeah, there's lots of things in terms of playing these kind of games, and it goes wider than just Dungeons and Dragons and things like that. Is the trust that you build up with your players. I mean, that's wholly separate from doing a podcast. That's just playing. You've got to trust that you're playing the same kind of game, because people want to get different things out of games, and people are comfortable with different styles of playing. So you almost build up a shorthand with your players that you have, that you riff off them, and you almost have in jokes, etc., that you can go back to. With regards to like telling your players, don't go here, don't do this, don't do that, or please do this, I don't tend to do that myself. What I do, probably from experience or from other things is I have tricks up my sleeve that I'll do. If they try and go somewhere where I'm not ready for them to go, I will deploy something to slow them down.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a character moment, you know, a callback. It will be the journey. I can stop them on the journey there. You know, how many times can you deploy a horde of goblins to slow down people? Or, you know, just as they're about to go, reintroduce an old character who, you know, you haven't seen in a while. Or give someone a really strong character moment that needs a lot of reflection, and you can easily burn through half an hour navel gazing with a character or something. So yeah, I suppose from my point of view as a DM, say it's a city, they're going to go to a city, never been there before, get them part way there, and just have a really nice build up to the city, because all cities have gates.
Yeah.
You know, entranceways. You know, who's coming into the city? Is it an industrialized city? Is there a market in the city? Are you going to have loads of carts? There's going to be fruit. Is it? Yeah, there's got to be something on the way in. Is there? Could there be guards? You know, checking people's passes. In one campaign, not on the podcast, there was a plague. You know, and people are like, you know, doing medical checks. That seems very prescient now during these current times. You know, you can find ways of slowing the players down without it feeling like it's on rails. Whether they realize that or not, I'm sure they do. The only time that goes badly wrong is like summoning circles and portals and things like that, because you're just like, But yeah, it's certainly useful to have those tools in your belt. Again, I'm not sure that's really an expression, but we're going to go with it. We're going to have those tools in your toolkit. Other ones, I mean, it's exactly the same thing, right? You've got a big fight going on. It's either going too well or not well enough. It's never going just right in terms of, you know, things. Either the big monster you've created is far too powerful and smooshing everyone into the ground, or the, you know, horde of 17 skeletons are just fallen to bits or whatever. So you have to introduce something into the narrative, you know, bring an NPC out of nowhere to rescue them. Or, as I said to one of you, I can't remember, in one of our interviews, you know, the giant creature could just have a heart attack. You know, you could be fighting a giant minotaur or something, and years of indiscriminate abuse of mayonnaise, and it just sort of grabs its chest and keels over. Or something like that. You know, there are narrative hooks to get you out of tight situations in D&D. And silly things like that are delightful to people. Not if you deploy them every week, because they become, you know, cliched. But, you know, especially if, you know, you're going for funny over... There's a lot of places to hide in humour where there probably isn't in like a deadpan podcast. But yeah.
So
makes sense.
that's
the thing.
Yeah, amazing. I do have to ask you, because I'm always very impressed with the names you come up for characters. Now, how many of those are improv and on the spot, and how many of them do you have like a sort of? I know Paul's, for example. There's so many NPCs he uses called George, but for example, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's someone called Webley Pebbles in one of your recent episodes.
Thank you. Yeah. He's an old man. Yeah.
Which is a fantastic name, and there are plenty of other equally strange and brilliant names.
My favourite was Mellifluent Belchcrack.
That is amazing.
Thank you.
I'm starting to feel like you don't think George is an amazing name, Callum.
Well, I haven't had the most positive experience with your George NPCs.
There was also Sir George. Okay, Sir George made an appearance. He's a completely different George.
Spelled with a J.
But so yeah.
Is it Mellifluent? What? How do you say that? I can't even pronounce it. Would you mind saying that again? Mellifluence. That's amazing. I mean,
I'll get it wrong now. They're words in the English language. You can tell I'm a posh twat who went to a posh private school. There are two words in the English language. One is mellifluous and one is melliferous. I'm going to get this wrong. Melliferous is being like honey, and I think mellifluous is tasting like honey. They come from the Latin word for honey. So I had this goblin priestess, and I really like this idea. You know, this great idea, this ancient, haggard goblin priestess, and she had a beehive on her back that had grown into her due to some kind of, you know, evil magics and stuff. And I just loved this idea that, you know, somehow I had to work something honey or bee into her name. And then I'm a real sucker for any kind of compound. There are a lot of players in our sort of games who have surnames like Moistfoot or Belchcrack or Skankweasel. I don't know. Like it's Leather Lips is another one. Like there's something beautiful about compound. There's something nice about alliteration. There's something nice about having one of them being slightly rude or silly. No matter what the noun is, if you make the adjective slightly, you know, interesting. I think so. It all stems from, and again, I think in one of the interviews we did with one of you two, I watched a course with Neil Gaiman, and he was talking about, you know, how he builds characters and stuff, and he always said, give them a silly hat.
Yeah.
And, you know, that could be a hat, but it's also something about the characters memorable. I read a lot of fantasy novels. You can't see them on the bookshelf over there. But the amount of times I have to get a bloody wiki out, and I'm like, who's this character? I'm like 6 books deep into like something by Brandon Sanderson or Robert Jordan or someone like that. And you can't remember who the character is because you've already got 40 other characters, and you're like, who's this guy who's just walked into the room? So if you give somebody half a chance with a funny accent or a silly name or a funny, you know, limp or a lisp, sorry, that's bad. They're not funny things. They're just things that are memorable. Apologies to anyone who has a limp or a lisp. But apologies to anyone who has a beehive, you know, melded to their back through some.
Apologies to anyone called George as
dark
well.
arts. Yeah,
just apologies. Yeah. Oh, they're just so sorry.
I'm just sorry for existing. Yeah. So the names were just an easy way because you've got so many, and again, I don't know what it's like running a campaign for yourselves. I have a Miro board. Other boards are available. We are not sponsored by Miro, but I have a Miro board and it has lots of digital post-it notes, and I have the entire cast up there with little, you know, info bits and stuff. And so having interesting names like Maleficent's Belchcrack it just makes it a bit easier to differentiate them, because God knows there are a hell of a lot of them. But then sometimes it works the other way. You know, they met a rock troll once, I don't think appears in any of the podcast episodes yet, whose name was just Nigel. Because I thought that's quite incongruous, isn't it? You know, it's giant rock troll. He was an interesting guy.
Yeah.
They met him in a dwarven mine that they were trying to escape from, and he was just stomping around, and he ended up eating a lot of dwarf miners, and there's a point where he's in a lot of pain and they think he might be dying. It turns out he's just constipated. He accidentally he's having problems shitting out a dwarf lantern.
As anyone
with
would.
All the bones.
Anyone would. Yeah, of course.
But he has a lovely redemptive arc, and they take him to a little village in the countryside, and all the children in the little agricultural village play with Nigel the rock troll, and it's beautiful. And there's this tense moment where there's a squish under his foot, and everyone's like, oh no, he's killed a child. But it was okay. It was just a pumpkin. But there was a lot of tension as we thought maybe Nigel had smooshed one of the children that he was using him as a maypole.
Well,
sorry. Again, apologies.
He certainly is memorable.
Yeah, there you go. Like, it's just these lovely little moments in D&D.
I'm going to have to use the term "a Nigel amongst Belchcracks," I think, because
Nigel amongst Belchcracks.
Because if everyone's got such amazing double, you know, linked up names, a Nigel is going to be remembered. Amongst all of that.
Unlike all the other ones, like the elves. No one will ever remember the entire pantheon of elves I had to create.
But Nigel amongst Belchcracks, you're welcome. That's amazing. What is in future for Adventurers Anonymous? Have you got a goal you want for it? Are you thinking I think you guys would really suit doing like a live show, for example, like getting people on stage and doing it, something like that, because it's just really entertaining. So, is that something you think of doing, or have you got any plans to
I
be on the
thought we were just
podcast?
going to make it. Yeah, I thought we were going to spin it up into a political campaign. Maybe try and get the disenfranchised, and try and really turn it into to a political movement and get behind it. Maybe if enough people, I think maybe I could bring down democracy. No, what do we want? Sorry, cool. What do we want for Adventurers Anonymous? For people to have fun. It's a very saturated market, as you're probably aware. There are people out there who probably do what I do far better than me. What do I want for us? I mean, obviously, I want us to be successful. I would like us. All I ever want is to make people happy. That is the bottom line of it. I don't need thousands and thousands and millions of followers. I just want to know that someone somewhere who's having a crap day escaped from the humdrum mundanity, even, there's a word, from the mundanity of life and the worries of bills and the arguments and, the pressures and the stresses and the anxiety. Stick a pair of headphones on. There you go. There's a bunch of, something I can escape into. And, again, that's why we did it in lockdown. And, I very much welcome that for anybody who wants to lose themselves in a bit of silliness. Beyond that, what would I like? Yeah, a live show, maybe. Obviously, I would have no problem with that. I'm not 100% sure half the players in our campaign, in our group, in our podcast have ever tried to sit on or stand on stage and entertain people. But yeah, that would be nice. We just opened a shop. Literally before coming on here, I was sorting out some merchandise, so you can buy tote bags and stickers and fridge magnets and coffee mugs and Lord only knows what. But I don't think those are really fundamental parts of what we're trying to do. They're just frippery around the edges. A community of people, and it's what Homebrew Havoc and all your good selves have done. It's a lovely, somewhat the nicest community of people I think I've ever met. And I was a member of the Reader's Digest. You guys are possibly the nicest community of people, and the wider community as well. And just to be part of that is an honor and a privilege in itself.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not,
and maybe teach people.
Guys, yeah, and you've got a lot of skills with improv, and I mean, it's part of the reason we want you on this podcast is to pick your brains about it, because I'm always so impressed with what you do. When you say you guys, but you are part of the community. You are, and you're not.
You are also you guys.
Not, you are you guys.
We don't run this. We're not in charge of TTRPG. I promise you. But yeah, you are also.
You may be the puppet master. Have you seen the strings off the marionette? Yeah, this is you, Paul. This is you. You're behind the scenes. Yeah, no, there are lots of things. I would love for us. Always reach. I've lost the ability to speak. Reach a wider audience would be lovely. We have some lovely, international fans. So, I'm all about, one of the things I love about what we do is it brings people together from different, countries and cultures, and, it unifies them all under one silly house. And giving other people, and I said this in the interview we did with the wonderful Cal, giving people permission to try is one of the biggest things for me, because I am, as Chanel, the voice of Maud, would say, I am the world's greatest show pony, and I genuinely couldn't give a shit what, I do what I do because I love doing what I do, and I don't really mind. I'm not that self-conscious. So, but that's come through just doing, being, expressing myself, creating. And I know for a lot of people, they don't have those opportunities, and no one's ever told them to try, and no one's ever given them a safe space or a safe platform to, put a silly voice on. Because you can play D&D with pen and paper, and, everyone can just speak their normal voice, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But isn't it magical when somebody tries the voice of a dwarf, or, like a sort of, I'm the world's angriest dwarf, and I rolled dwarf Scottish. Like, it's every single dwarf in our campaign is like, you will taste the edge of my axe. Like, there's never been like a dwarf who's like, all right, yeah. Would you mind stepping out of the way? Like, everything's sort of like more fun when you just dial it up or dial it down, or suddenly characters become brave or bold or scared or like anxious, and it's nice when you take a little risk on characters. Sorry to go off on one there.
No, that's why you're here. You go for it.
To give people permission to try, because I've always said, and again, something that's happening hopefully. Not so much with Adventurers Anonymous, but we live city centre here, and there's a cafe on the end of the street, and they're good friends of ours, and they reached out to us the other day, and they said we've always wanted to play D&D, and we were like, okay, and they said you can borrow our cafe for the evening. It'll be closed, obviously, because they operate in 9 to 5, and they said, well, we've got some friends. You can have our cafe. Can you teach us all how to play D&D?
Nice.
Amazing. I was like, yeah, sure. Make you a one-shot off the top of my head.
Why does everyone live near a gaming cafe except for me? Every single person we've spoken to, like, I just go to the gaming cafe or the game shop around the corner. But I live near a field. Where does everybody else live? That they just live near all these
evangelize the cows. Get the cows going. And one of the things they said was, what do I need to know? How do I play? Or, do I need to be this or that, or talk in a silly voice? And I was like, oh, don't worry, I'll be the biggest idiot in the room. Like, I will set the bar for idiocracy so high that any attempt at, role playing you do will be safe. Mm-hmm. Like, no one's going to be a bigger idiot than me. No one's going to take more risks than me, because then everything else is safe. All other, I will be the fool, so that everyone else can try and have a go. Because D&D is very, and probably most TTRPGs, to be honest, the more you put in, the more you get out.
Yeah.
And some of the funniest moments are moments that went badly wrong, or you saw the line of common decency and accidentally tripped over it. Like, that's the kind of place I like to create. And in answer to your question earlier, if there was ever an opportunity to teach people, if there was ever an opportunity to mentor people, I think I would love to do that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and you'd be a great person for it, without a doubt. I mean, like I say, and I've said it before, and I've said it on this interview, I'm impressed by what you do. I enjoy what you do. All of the guys on Adventures Anonymous, they're all really funny. Just keep it going.
Because I haven't listened to all the episodes. I started at episode 2, which I think at the time was the first one that was on Spotify. And I listened to them at like 2 times the speed. And normally, right, which is what I do to most of my podcasts, most on Audible or Spotify. And it is so rare that I get to the end of the first episode of any podcast or any actual play, and I go, yes, I want to listen to the next one. And I was 3 episodes in, and I thought that was a really good first episode. I was so far in, and I loved it. And my partner has sort of forced me to listen to something else for now, but as soon as I've done that, I will be coming back to your podcast. But I want to ask, if you don't mind, could you tell us the story of Lady? I believe her name was Lady, the wolf, the dog?
That's right. Yeah. You want me to tell you the story of Lady?
Yeah, that was so good. It inspired a moment in my campaign, and I've never experienced that. So could you tell us the story of Lady?
I can tell you all about Lady. Yeah, Lady is a beautiful wolf. So for people who don't know, for people who don't listen to our podcast, maybe one day you will, but one of our players, who is called Tatty Bojangles, who is a gnome archer. He was highly trained gnome archer. He was betrayed by his unit and left for dead. And when he came round, he was, I believe, near the puppy of a wolf. And him and the wolf pup kind of looked after each other. And they went through time together, and they went through trauma together, and they grew together. Lady was her name. She is what is her name? She's a snow white wolf. And Tatty and her have this beautiful relationship that is bonded together through trust. You know, she will protect him. She listens to his commands, etc. And so we go quite far through the campaign, and we meet Maud of Nightmares, who's a tiefling. She's a druid. She can naturally talk to animals. So Chris is like, "Oh, would you talk to Lady?" And again, I've got to improvise because I'm like, oh, bollocks, I'm not ready for this. I've got nothing on my sleeve. So this is episode 2, I think, possibly.
Yeah, it was.
And so we've had this beautiful wolf. I mean, yeah, I say beautiful. It's majestic in my mind. I've got a very vivid imagination. But, I imagine, all the sort of like piercing blue eyes of a wolf and, the tawny fur. Can you describe a wolf as tawny? Is that what you describe an owl as? Anyway, sure. Why not? So like it's like a highly violent Build-A-Bear. And we talk to her and I panic and I don't know what voice to do. So I'm like, my name's Barbara. And it turns out this lovely wolf is really pissed off because this is the first time she's ever been able to express that this man that she's bonded with over like a decade has just been calling her lady. But she's not a lady. She's like, Barbara. She's sort of like, sounds like she smoked 40 cigarettes a day for 20 years. And it was just a moment of improv and a moment of silliness. And, if I'd rolled the dice, if I'd made that mental decision again, she could have come out with something different. And the problem is as well, I keep forgetting, so I call her lady. And then, we get into these in-jokes about stop dead naming Barbara. And she, as companions go, they are very close, and it's lovely, I think, in something like D&D to see the inner minds of a character that you don't often get to play with that often. So again, that was just a bit of silliness. So her real name is Barbara, but I don't know at what point she named herself Barbara, but Tatty obviously thought she was a lady, and she sees herself as anything but a lady.
That's brilliant. That's so good. Yeah, and Paul, like you said, he did take that inspiration and did a very similar thing as a tribute to that wonderful bit of improv from yourself. So thank you for that. And me knowing that part as well did make me chuckle quite a lot. So we'll be wrapping up very shortly. But I wanted to ask you. I mean, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I do this with every single guest that we have on here. Is there anyone you want to shout out?
Oh, Lord. Who do I want to shout out? I mean, obviously, like, the cast. Like, Chris, Raggy, Lewis, Matt, Chanel. Who would I want to shout out? I mean, at the moment, we did a shout out in our last episode that went out to Grim & Co., who are a UK-based children's charity. We record this in Sheffield in the United Kingdom. They are based in Rotherham, which is another city nearby. And they do amazing work with empowering children creatively with writing and reading. And I think that's so important. Because like I said earlier, I just take it for granted. I was surrounded by the works, anything you could think of. Rudyard Kipling, Roald Dahl, Terry Pratchett, Isaac Asimov, Charles Dickens, I just had everything available to me. So that I feel very privileged. But I know for a lot of people, that, and especially in this climate, this day and age, people don't have time to read. People don't even have money to pay for books. They're too busy, trying to heat their house and live on a shoestring budget. So any kind of charity that's inspiring the next generation of kids to read, to write creatively, I think is just fun. And also, it does like an after school club and stuff, and holiday club. So yeah, I have so much time for them. So I will definitely shout them out. They are wonderful people, and they are obviously serving a very small community within Rotherham. But anyone who wants to help,
if it's going to it's going to help feed imagination and future DMs. Who knows? I mean, this sounds like an amazing cause. So yeah,
that's
definitely check that
Grim
out.
& Co.
Grim & Co. Definitely check that out and see all the work they do. Where can people find you, AJ, and Adventurers Anonymous?
Where can people find me? Well, I'm all over the place. I think my handle on Twitter is HandyGammon, but and I didn't know Brexit was going to happen when I created that name for myself 20 years ago. So I once was on the PlayStation playing FIFA, and a very angry Liverpudlian, who I'm not going to attempt to do the accent of, started shouting at me, calling me like a Tory something the other. And I was like, no, it's just a name. No, it was just two random things. Also, one time I tried to apply for a job and I gave the email address handygammon@gmail.com, and they said, that's quite masturbatory, isn't it?
You've got.
I need to change my email
job,
address.
Didn't they?
Yeah,
you got the job. They just saw the email address and went, "Yeah, you're in."
Yeah, so that's me. I can be found on most of the major socials, but Adventurers Anonymous are all over the place. You can find us. I think we're Adventurers ANO #1, as in the number one. That's on Twitter. It's where we do a lot of our social stuff. We've obviously got a Facebook page that doesn't get used enough. We have. You'll find us on Instagram. We try and put out as much content on Instagram as we can. We've got photos from behind the scenes on Instagram. Hopefully, by the time you're reading this, we should have posted maybe a picture of some of our merchandise, which we're hoping to sell soon. You probably would have posted
some merchandise by the time we put this out. You'll be fine.
Oh yeah, of course, this will go out. Yeah, dear Lord. Yeah, I'll be in my 40s by the time.
You would have finished your campaign by the time you put this out. You'll be fine.
Absolutely, yeah. Barbara will have transitioned into like a badger or something by the time this comes out. We've got adventurers-anonymous.com, which is a website that just collates everything. And obviously reach out to us either here on Homebrew Havoc or on the socials. We try to chat to everybody we possibly can do. It's kind of the beauty of this community of people in the sort of fantasy geek TTRPG community is everyone talks to each other and everyone offers everyone advice and honest feedback. I would say, if you do get the opportunity, please, please, please leave us a review. We have lots of listeners. No one ever leaves us a bloody review. I don't even mind if it's rude. In fact, I welcome it if it's, scathing. I love a 1-star review. I'm not going to beg you for a 5-star review. Tell me that I'm abysmal. But any kind of review, like, I swear to God, we get so many listeners and so much lovely, people write in, but no one leaves us a sodding review on Spotify or Apple or whatever.
I find it quite hard to leave someone a review on Spotify. Not because I don't want to give feedback, but because I find it really hard to find where to do it, especially on my phone and on the computer app, on my desktop app. It's not an easy to find place. So if they're using their apps and not the website, I don't know where to do it on my phone, and I've tried to leave all of them reviews, including myself. So people might it's not a big button that says leave review. I promise you, you've got to work hard to leave it.
Who hasn't left themselves a review? I mean, that host, he's handsome. That beard, top beard in the industry, would have his children. So if people do get the opportunity, please leave us some reviews, because that would mean the world to us. It just reminds us that the people out there actually are listening. And obviously reinforces that we're not the world's worst podcast, which would be nice for people to know.
Brilliant podcast. And all you TTRPG people, make sure you go and listen and leave Adventurers Anonymous a review, preferably not 1-star.
So before we draw a line under all of this, like organised insanity, are you going to play us something on one of those guitars behind you? Is that do you take requests?
Maybe if we get around to season 8 of Cal's Questions, I might do one. But as this is the pilot season 1, I'm just going to leave that there as a bit of a
tease.
I'm just going to.
And I was gutted before we started recording as well. They confirmed that I'm not the final guest. I thought I was the pinnacle of season 1. I thought I was the special guest. I thought
you are a special guest. You're a very special guest.
We can't actually mention the final guest either because it's a surprise. But we've already done the recording, so me and Callum know who it is. But
you're going to unveil Walton Goggins.
Yeah,
you're at a high peak with me, and then you're just going to like pull the rug out from underneath me.
This first season has been like. I don't even know what order people are going to be released in, but we'll see what happens. I've got to edit them first.
Yeah. I have no idea what I'm doing. My introductions are always just like, okay, let's do this. I just like chatting to all the best people, you know.
It's lovely, isn't it? And again, it's all testament to this random community of people. You know, you can just sit around and talk shit, and it makes for good content. Yeah, I mean, it's been lovely having both of you on as guests. We had so much fun picking your brains about, you know, this, that, and the other. And you know, we're looking forward to having more guests on ours as well. But you know, please feel free to drag any of the members of our podcast on. See, look, he's drinking a bottle of piss. Told you he was. Told you earlier. Good luck editing that out of the podcast. That's a little.
This doesn't get edited.
Oh, wait, don't.
Whatever we don't
edit.
Oh, there's no B-roll. Shit, there's no B-roll. Okay, good. Excellent.
This goes out.
Apologies.
This is all about chill chat and what we say goes, and it's all.
Oh man,
this is all off the cuff and genuine, and that's how we are. But
do you know what? I'm going to let you into a secret, by the way, before you get rid of me. I don't usually do video stuff. I'm not going to say I'm not wearing any trousers. I am, but I don't usually do video stuff, and I'm actually sitting on my own hands so that I don't scratch my nose. Because I think left to my own devices, I'd just be playing with, like, you know, scratching my chin and playing with.
That's what I do all the time.
I have a fiddler.
Someone said it makes. You got a fiddler.
I have a thing I fiddle with that people can't. See, it's a pocket watch.
That's majestic.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I've actually forced myself to sit on my own hands so that I'm not scratching my nose for the last hour. So, I've got no blood circulation. I
was going to say, you might want to take them out soon.
Yeah. And B, it's going to be lovely to get to the end of this so that I can use my hands again.
Well, I hope you're able to use your hands again after being sat on them for an hour.
Of him learning
on that bombshell.
Yeah, Paul, is there anything you want to say before we sign off?
Not particularly. You can obviously find me at Ampersand Productions all over the internet, Ampersand D20. And on Thursdays, we do Homebrew Havoc. On Tuesday, we do Blades of the Dark. And on every other Saturday, I do Blood War, which is nothing like Descent into Avernus, but it started off like that. So, yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Intriguing.
Amazing. You can find me at CLeeDND on Twitter, or go to cleednd.com for all funny clips and D&D things and TTRPG things and voice acting things, all the good things. And that just leaves me to say thank you very much, AJ, for coming on and chatting to us about improv and D&D and Adventurers Anonymous and handling chaos and all that good stuff. So thank you very much, everyone.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you so much for inviting me. More than happy to come back anytime you want. Just give me no notice like you did today. Ask me with absolutely no notice, and I'll just put on a shirt, shave, and come on. Yeah,
and sit on your hands, and off we go. All right.
There we go.
Thank you very much. That's been Carl's Questions, and we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you.
Good night.